Hey guys, welcome to another episode of El Jefe's Chop Shop. This week we're back on the wagon and we're going to put all of the sensors on the engine. So in the last episode on this engine, I mentioned that I needed to fit an idle air control valve and a little plenum chamber thing. So when you're running independent throttle bodies, you need to have them all have the same vacuum source. So you need to make them share it. So the idea is you run one of these, have a barb with a little hose going to each of the runners, and then this balances everything out. And then the idle air control lets in a little bit of air after the throttle body. So this and the idle air control will be using the same air in the same spot of the runners, if that makes sense. So the idea is this needs to be plumbed to each of the four runners, then one to the map sensor on the ECU and one to the idle air control valve, and then the other side of the idle air control valve needs to have a filter. So a lot of cars run it back into the other side of the throttle body where it would be filtered. I don't think I'm going to have that luxury, so I might end up running it in a filter, but we'll see how we go. So the idea is to try and jam these things in here in a way that looks nice and still have room for the throttle cable in here and still have room for the fuel stuff here and the fuel stuff here. So there's not a lot of room to work with, and obviously there's injectors missing still, so we're going to have room for all of that stuff. So I'm just going to keep playing with this until I come up with some kind of solution. So I've got an idea. I don't know if it's going to look right. I don't know if it's going to fit, but I'm going to give it a go and just see how we go along with the progress. Alright, so I've come up with a way of fitting the IACV and the plenum log in, and it's not actually touching anything. So the idea with this is then we'll get a 90-degree O-ring port to go from here and come up 90 degrees and have the filter on the top of there. So that would fit nicely, and you can still get the cable out between the two here. Then if I flip this billet piece, which has two little tangs just here on the other side, if I flip that around, I can go off of this fuel rail screw back here, come this way, have those two pick up, and also there's a screw hole down in there. I might be able to pick up on that, or if I get stuck I can use this one over here. And then that'll brace all of this, because this is currently all just pivoting on this one screw here. And then once all that's actually reinforced, I should be able to run the throttle cable and run a bracket off of here as well for the actual throttle cable. And then the next problem will be the vacuum lines have to come from under there. So there's 5 ports under there. One is not really usable because of the head bolt, and then the other 4 should be usable. And then I'm going to do a quick 90 and run them into the plenum. And then this one will go through the firewall to the ECU for the map signal. So I just need to make sure I can get the right fitting for here. So it's going to be an O-ring -10 to a 90 swivel, and then I'll have to get a barb fitting to go to this, something like that. And then I'm going to need a fitting from here, which I need the new rocker cover. I'm going to go from here to the throttle, so at least you've got the PCV re-plumbed back in as well. And then I need to make sure I can get fittings for the underside of this and also here to the firewall. So it's a bit of a mission, and I'm just going back and forth between the Speedflow book and what I can find, and hopefully I'll come up with an answer. Alright, I've been stuffing around with this for a while now. Worked out what fittings I need for the bottom of this and the back of this. This fitting that I needed for here didn't actually exist, so I modified the one that I had. So it was a -8 O-ring port to -8 just regular AN taper. So I've made it so it's smooth instead of a taper, and then put another O-ring on that side, and then I'll put a bit of thread sealing on there as well, because it's not really supposed to work like that, but it is only air, so worst case I have a bit of a vacuum leak. It's not going to put fuel everywhere. So then I've managed to use one of the standoffs in here. So this standoff here, this came with the idle control valve, and then this one here I'm going to make out of aluminium, and I'm going to try and make it out of one piece. So it's going to also have 2 holes in the top for the throttle cable to attach to, but it picks up on a bolt back there on the fuel rail, picks up on 2 here on the idle air control, and it picks up on 1 down there on the manifold. So that's tomorrow's job, and that's going to be a bit of a nightmare. So I'm going to try and make it out of one piece. It looks roughly like this. It needs 4 precision holes and 3 precision bends. So hopefully it's not as hard as it looks. And we can get that all buttoned up. And then when I get to the throttle cable stage, I'll have somewhere to put 2 little nutserts, or even just 1 for the throttle cable. And then when I get the new rocker cover, I can make sure that it fits. There's really not much room in there. There's probably like 3mm the whole way along, so there's not a lot. And then I'm going to go from the PCV into the back throttle as well. Try and keep that system looking nice and neat as well. And then we'll work out the rest of the fuel system, and there's just enough room in there for a plug. So it's pretty tight, but it's getting there. So we'll get onto it tomorrow and try and make that aluminium bracket. Alright, so it's a new day. Got the template I made yesterday. Got a piece of aluminium I've been using for everything else. Going to try and copy this onto the aluminium. Then I'm going to try and drill this hole here and bend here first, and then try and work my way up and then to this back corner. So if I can get that right, I'm pretty confident I can get that right, but this is going to be a little bit tricky. So here we go. Let's just dig in and make it 3 or 4 times. Alright, so I've got that cut out, used the jigsaw, drilled some holes, so now I need to do a bend here, and then I'll make sure that this hole and these 2 holes line up nicely, and then I need to do a bend here, and then a bend here, and then drill a hole here, and make all 4 holes line up perfectly, and make sure all the angles are perfect. So, wish me luck. Alright, so I've been in the shed for about an hour today. Got this bracket all sorted. So I actually did it first time, which is a little bit surprising. This one I ended up bending on the fly on the actual engine so that it was exactly right. I didn't want to get to this point and then have to make all of this again because I stuffed this one up. So that's not bent with the folder, it's just bent sort of with a hammer and by hand. But it looks alright, and it's also hidden. And I also realised when I started I could just take the plenum off instead of trying to work around it, which I should have done yesterday. So it gets us reasonably square here. It's not dead square, but only we know that. So then we've got the 2 bolts up here. I need to take a little bit of material off of here because it actually fouls on the billet. And then this guy down here is nice and sturdy. And on this side of it, it does actually get in the way of the plug at the moment, but I can take a whole bunch of material off, as you can see down there. So what I want to do now is just sort of round this corner, around that bottom corner, just take that little bit off there that I was just talking about, and then just clean it all up and make it look really nice. And then we've still got heaps of room for nutserts for the throttle body for the throttle cable when we need it. So there's actually plenty of room, and it's super rigid. Can shake the whole engine off of it and it doesn't move. So pretty happy with that. Just take it off, clean it up, and put it back on. Alright, so I got the bracket cleaned up. I cut it with the jigsaw, which I'm not super stoked about, but that is on the inside, and the rest of it I just cleaned up with some 240 grit and a bit of WD-40. So let's put this back on the engine and see what it looks like. Alright, I got it on. All bolts up quite nicely, and it's super rigid still, so pretty happy with that. You can't really see where I hit it with the jigsaw, it's like right in there, so that's fine. And then the bottom now clears the plug. So what I need to do next is get a fitting which is already on its way, goes straight up, and then I can put a filter on here, and then I've got 2 fittings to go from here to the firewall, which will just step it down from this dash 8 to like a 3/16 or a 1/8, I can't remember. So that steps it right down, can go into the firewall which goes to the ECU, and then all the fittings on the bottom are on their way as well, and I need to run those probably this way. So from under here, go underneath the idle air control, through here, and to each of the runners as they come up. So that's going to be a bit of a pain to make happen, but that is one of the next jobs. So still got to round off the coil mounts but I want to get them all welded up before I do that, so that I don't have to do it twice. I don't want to have to weld it or get it welded and then it's not quite right and then have to like re-round everything. So I'm just going to leave them for now. So then we've got coolant. The front one needs to be welded on still. The dizzy's all sorted. I just need to put a bush in that, which is a later problem. So we're getting there with the sensors. There's still a oil pressure and oil temp sensor, and then a fuel temp and fuel pressure sensor. I won't be using both of those aspects for each of them, but the option is there. So they have to be mounted to the car, not the engine. So I'll probably end up mounting one just here behind the engine on the firewall, and one probably here on the firewall as well. So we'll see how we go when that gets in the car. I'll do those. So I'm also still waiting on the rocker cover. Once that gets here, I'll put it straight on, put a gasket on, and then I can put the top half back on as well. I need some gaskets for that. I need some gaskets for in here and still gaskets. So the next job is to sort out the TPS on the top half of the manifold. All right, so I've shown the TPS setup before, but now that it's off the car or off the engine, it's a little bit easier. So the original throttle body's throttle cable is here. So the idea is that this gets pulled from underneath and flips the throttle bodies. So then I've made a linkage in here which goes to the original what was a sliding shaft for the carbs. I've made that into a pivoting point, so you can see two little spaces and the arm, and on the end there that pivots around. So the idea is that that feeds through into the TPS, into that little thing that Tim and I made the other day, second stage. So I need to weld this on around this way and then make the bolts a bit shorter and just make this as snubbed as I can. And then I also want to redo this because it looks a bit whack coming out so far, so I'm just going to bring it in a bit closer and just make it a bit nicer. So I'll pull this apart and I'll do that. Alright, I got the top half of the manifold all taken apart. So you can see here on the end I've put the little TPS doodad on there. So I need to put a weld just here just to stop it from spinning on this shaft. And then the idea is once that's done, TPS like this will slide on there. 2 bolts here. I want to trim this to make it look a bit nicer. And then everything's nice and flush with the end of the TPS, and the new screws are in there and they're nice and short as well. So that just makes it as short as I possibly can, and you won't be able to see the weld. It'll be nice and neat. So hopefully this will be all good in just a moment. Alright, so I've welded on the TPS adapter thing. I welded it and then immediately touched it and burnt my thumb. So that's what you get. Then I've cut this square and it's ready to go back on. So I'm just going to grab some tools and assemble that, and then I'll put it all back on the engine and we'll see what it looks like. Alright, this has been quite a mission, but I've got everything to fit. This looks pretty good. TPS is nice and flush. So I'm waiting on a fitting for in here, which I told you about before. So then this filter will sit something like that. Nice and tucked out the way. Then when I get the new rocker cover, I'll go from here with the PCV into the back throttle body. That'll be nice and clean. Then we've got 2 fittings coming from here, which will go to the firewall, be nice and good. We've got the injectors and the new plastic boots and all this sort of stuff to seal that properly. They're coming. Then I need to put the fuel pressure regulator and stuff up the front, and then the fuel line off the back. So a little bit more to do in there, but it should be pretty good, and I should be able to hide most of the wiring either behind the fuel rail or down the front here. So we'll see how we go with that. Then we've got the coil mounts which need to get welded, so that'll hopefully happen soon. Get a temporary dizzy cap, so I'm going to get one of those made at a later date. And then as for sensors, we got that one to weld on the front, and we're pretty much done other than the 2 that bolt to the firewall as far as I know. So what I'm going to do now is just clean up the bench because it's quite a mess, and I'm going to sort out the parts for these lists. So I've got a to start list, to run list, so that'll be like without a radiator, and then let it run. Then to take it to the tune I need to do that, and then to drive it after the tune I need to do that, and then finish the car I need to do that. So everything in these lists here are going to go in a box and get hidden away, and all of this stuff I'll leave accessible, and then that should clean up the bench a fair bit because this is ridiculous. Alright, so I had a good clean up yesterday. We got a box of wagon stuff under the bench, and just the 2 boxes that I need to work on at the moment. And then got all the tools put away and re-sorted out the toolbox. Got all this stuff organised. Got a pulley system starting to happen for the ladder. May redesign that, not too sure. And just got everything nice and organized, ready for a new day. Alright, so I thought I was done with sensors, but I remembered I need to put an intake air temp sensor. So this guy needs to go higher than the throttle body intake, so it gets the temperature of the intake air, hence intake air temperature. So I want to leave this sensor off until I get the engine in the car, so I know how much bonnet clearance I've got. I know I've got about 20 mil at the front, and I think I've got more at the back, but I don't want to have this poking out too much and it's touching the bonnet. So it's a pretty easy bracket, this one, so I'll just go off of here, these two screws here, and just come out something like that. Should be pretty simple. Should be able to make it pretty thick, and can probably just do it real short little guy. So it should be pretty easy, but I don't want to do it until the engine is in the car and I know how much clearance I've got. So I also just got word that the rocker cover is sitting at Garage 7 waiting for me. I got it sent there just in case, so I didn't have to be home to pick it up. And then he's also got the couple of fittings waiting for me there. So you'll have to wait till next week to see that, but almost got everything we need for this engine. So I know the sensors aren't very interesting, but it is just a cool little detail that I wanted to put into videos. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week.